Tag und willkommen zu meiner neuen Videoserie, Grammatik-Wiederholung. In this series, I'm going to review for y'all some of the major grammar concepts that you need to remember going into AP exam or college entrance exams, things like that. So we're starting off in this first video on things that you've learned in German 1, Deutsch 1. So we're taking it back to the very beginning here, and we're going to go pretty quickly through this. Okay, so heute sprechen wir über Zeitformen. Und heute in Teil 1 besprechen wir Präsens und Futur. In Teil 2 werden wir Präteritum und Perfekt besprechen. Okay, so Präsens. Hoffentlich wissen wir alle, dass schwache und starke Verben S-Ten-Ten-Endungen bekommen. So whether it's a regular or an irregular verb, usually they're going to take S-Ten-Ten endings. So if this is your subject, then these are your endings. Okay, we had this little rhythm, this little beat we learned back in German 1. Ich, du, sie, es, wir, ihr, sie, STT, ANT. Okay, that applies to the vast majority of German verbs, but we know there are some irregular ones as well. Now, some side notes here that would kind of, I guess, be additions to just taking off the EN and putting the S-Ten-Ten ending on it. When a verb ends in ELN, for instance, basteln, the E before the L is dropped, but only in the ish form. And it's really just because the way you say it, you're not going to say it anyways. Instead of saying ich bastele, if you say it quickly, it's just ich bastle. So it ends up just being dropped. The next little nitpicky side note is that when a verb stem ends in an S sound, anything that sounds kind of like an S, then the do ending is only going to be a T, because it would just be redundant to stick another S right there. For instance, in heißen, it's wie heißt du. And then when a verb stem ends in D or T, and then if it's an M or an N and preceded by another consonant, you'll see why, consonants other than L or R, then they keep an E in the endings. And really, this is something that would come naturally to you, and you mostly do this correctly already, just because the reason this is here is because without the E in the ending, it would be really hard to say. So for instance, the verb reden, if you want to say you speak, it's du redest, because du redst is just kind of hard to get out and actually hear all the sounds you need to hear. Atmen is one of these examples with an M that is preceded by another consonant that's not a L or an R. So here we see it's preceded by a T. So atmen, to breathe, atmet, schwer. Because if you had to have the T there and no E, it'd be like atmet, like you can't even say it. So you really need the E in there. Warten, to wait on someone. This is another example. If you were to add a T to that and not have anything in the middle, you'd have like wartet, and it would just be kind of difficult to say. So again, we're really just making it easier to say. And then y'all are all really familiar with wie findest du and all that, so knowing to keep the E in the ending to make it easier to say. Okay, weiter. So starke Verben haben oft ein Vokalwechsel, a stem vowel change. So zum Beispiel werfen wird wirft den Ball, so it goes from an E to an I. Or fahren, we know, gets an umlaut. Du fährst zu schnell. These stem changes only show up in the do and the sie est forms for most of our strong verbs. You're not going to see it in the ish form, and you're not going to see it in the whole plural side. So for instance, if we were saying we throw the ball, it'd be wir werfen, and go back to the original. Or we drive too fast, wir fahren zu schnell. The only time when you're going to see a stem vowel change in more than just the do and the sie est forms is in modal verbs. Remember that the modal verbs have a stem vowel change in all of the singular forms. Sollen is the only one that doesn't have a stem vowel change. So here's some examples. Können, kann wirklich gut Baseball spielen. Wollen, willst du das Spiel anschauen? Dürfen, leider darf ich nicht. Müssen, ich muss den ganzen Tag arbeiten. Mögen, ich mag Baseball sowieso nicht. Und sollen, soll aber heute einen neuen Rekord schaffen. So if you were to use any of these in the plural forms, they would go back to their original stems and the original S-Ten-Ten endings as well. So the other thing that is different is that modal verbs they have modified S1010. So the ich and the RZS forms have no ending at all. And that's why you see up here kann instead of having a T there. And ich darf instead of having an E there. So, but the plural forms, again, they have their original stem, so they go back to this form, and they have the regular endings, whether it's en or t. So examples: Wir wollen ins Kino, aber wir können nicht, denn unsere Eltern mögen solche Filme nicht. Also müssen wir zu Hause bleiben. Okay? Another thing we have to talk about when we talk about present tense are trennbare Verben or trennbare Prefixverben, separable prefix verbs. So remember that there are several verbs in German that have a prefix on the front, and if that prefix, generally speaking, there's one exception, but if that prefix is a word on its own, it's generally going to separate when you actually conjugate it. So for instance, umziehen is to move, like to move somewhere. In the reflexive, remember, sich umziehen is actually to change clothes, but just umziehen, not reflexive, is to move somewhere. So I could say, ich ziehe nach New York City Ausprobieren would be to try out something. So you could say, ich probiere ein neues Hobby aus. Now, remember, if these are being used in infinitive form, like you're saying, I want to move to New York, ich will nach New York City umziehen, they're not going to be separated. You only separate them when you conjugate them. Now, some verbs have inseparable prefixes, so watch out for those. The one here that was my exception, where it is actually a word by itself, but it isn't separable, is über. So that's really the only one that people sometimes make mistakes on. Überzeugen, überfahren, things like that. They don't separate. It's inseparable. Okay, the last thing that I want to talk about with present tense, presence, is imperative, so our command forms. So just like in English, you put the verb first. With do commands, the first step is to conjugate the verb for do, then you drop the st ending, and sometimes you add an e ending on there and it kind of softens it, but it's not all the time. It kind of depends on the verb. It's something you get a feel for as you get more proficient in German. So Beispiele sind: mach das Bett, make the bed; iss das Gemüse, eat the vegetables; lies das Buch, read the book. For ear commands, it's even easier. You literally just conjugate it for ear, and obviously you don't have the word ear in there. So it's really just a T ending. So machst das Bett, esst das Gemüse, liest das Buch, if you were talking to more than one person informally. Now, if you're in a formal situation, remember, it doesn't matter if it's singular or plural. If you're talking to one person or many people formally, you want to use a Z command or a formal command. And the difference here is that it's the Z form of the verb, and you actually do put the subject in there. The subject is no longer understood. So you could say, for instance, machen Sie das Bett, or essen Sie das Gemüse. This also happens in the wir commands. Now, that might sound funny to you, like a we command, but when you're saying, like, let's do something, that's a we command. So you'll conjugate it for wir, and you'll actually put the word wir in there. You'll put the subject in. So you could say, machen wir das Bett, lesen wir das Buch. A couple side notes here. One of the things that coming from English that a lot of times we make mistakes on in presence is that we want to use all these helping verbs in English that just don't work in present tense German. And when I say here helping verbs are not used in present tense German, modal auxiliary verbs are technically helping verbs, yes, but not the way that we use helping verbs. We love to say things like I am playing, or I do play, or I am reading, or I do read, or things like that. And especially in our questions, we say like, are you doing this, or do you do this? But in German, you don't need that. You literally just use the present tense verb that is the main verb in the sentence, and you don't have to have a helping verb. So ich spiele can mean I play, I am playing, and I do play, depending on just the situation. So Beispiele: are you going swimming today? Schwimmst du heute? I'm just watching TV. Ich schaue einfach fern. Do you play golf often? Spielst du oft Golf? So you see in all those, in English we have like are, going, swimming. I guess I could have said gehst du heute schwimmen to be exactly the same, but the are swimming there, they just have schwimmst. I am watching, in German it's just ich schaue. And then do play, it's just spielst. So the last point on present tense is that it can be used to refer to the future when a future time phrase is used. So I will write the paper on Monday could be Ich schreibe den Aufsatz am Montag. And you don't have to have I will write. It could just be Ich schreibe, and you know it's on Monday because you have am Montag in there. But you also could use the future tense. So unsere andere Option ist Ich werde den Aufsatz am Montag schreiben. And that brings us into the future tense. Now this is, to me, the easiest tense to teach because really it has a very simple formula. Future tense, you just use werden as your conjugated verb for will, and then you put an infinitive form at the end of the clause. So werden does have a stem change and it's a little irregular. That's the one thing to watch out for. But after you have that, everything else is pretty easy. So let's try these out real quick. Was machst du am Samstag? So schreiben Sie das ins Futur. Was wirst du am Samstag machen? Okay, and an answer could be Ich werde Kekse backen. Okay, so let's take this question and put it in future. Gehst du einkaufen would be Wirst du einkaufen gehen? And you could answer Nein, ich werde schlafen. And lastly, kommst du mit zum Konzert? Wirst du mit zum Konzert kommen? Ja, ich werde mitkommen. There's our last word. Okay, das ist das Ende. So, schauen Sie mein nächstes Video, Grammatik-Wiederholung, Zeitformen, Teil 2. In dem Video werde ich über Präteritum und Perfekt sprechen. Danke für das Zuschauen. Tschüss.